Good evening and welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Sacred Sanctuary. Mental Health in the Sacred Sanctuary is a sacred space of healing and wellness centered where God dwells. And where does God dwell? Right in the center of ourselves and who we are. I am so glad that you have joined us. We have an amazing episode prepared for you. It is June, and so we are recognizing Pride Awareness Month. And so for Pride Awareness Month, we want you to get your notebooks, get your pens. It's going to be relatable and informative. And our host on this evening is Ms. Tiffany Majette. She's a marriage and family therapist here with Alfred Street's Office of Christian Care and Counseling. She'll introduce her two amazing guests, and you are in store for a great episode. Before we get to Tiffany and the panel on this evening, I would like to invite you to take a listen to the message from our own Pastor Wesley talking about pride and the importance of love. And that is the reason that we're having this episode, Embracing Pride. We are not here to change your opinion, help you form an opinion, but merely to inform you and remind you that love is key, and it is the transformational love of Christ that we need as we interact with everyone, all walks of life, and all of the decisions that we make as we move forward together on this journey. So again, please invite your friend, share this episode, and prepare yourselves for an amazing evening with Miss Tiffany and her guest on tonight.
The Bible teaches us that God so loved the entire world. I know every church doesn't practice it, but I want to acknowledge this month of Pride as we honor and celebrate the life and the love of those who identify differently than many of us. Here's the truth of the matter, that at Alfred Street, we desire to create a safe space for all of God's children to love, to worship, to be seen, to be served, to be safe, to be in a place where they can honor God in their lives. And I am proud to be part of a church that respects that. I know that every church doesn't, and that's fine. If you have difficulty with that, I have tons of other churches I can recommend to you that you can go to. But in this space, we honor the presence of God and the image of God in all of God's created creatures, all of humanity, all of those who serve the Lord our God. And I am just thankful that we remember the love of God covers all of us. That we are a loving church family. Jesus said, this is how you people will know that you're my disciples, when you have love one for another. Love is where we start. Love is where our journey as a family begins.
Good evening. I am Tiff Majette, and this is Mental Health in the Sacred Sanctuary and our episode, Embracing Pride. I have with me two of my good friends, my brothers, Dr. Keadrick Peters and Mr. Matthew Kirk. Dr. Peters and Kirk are going to both introduce themselves more and let you know a little bit more about what they do.
Yes, so good afternoon. Thank you for hosting this and very intentional, important conversation. I am Dr. Keadrick Peters, and my pronouns are he, human, and activist, and I'm honored to be in this space with you today. I currently work at Bowie State University, serving as the director of the LGBTQIA Resource Center, as well as university coordinator for the Office of Multicultural Programs and Civic Engagement, and also sociology faculty there. Thank you for having me.
I hope you all got all of that. Matthew Kirk.
Not as impressive, but my name is Matthew Kirk. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a professional counselor at Families First Counseling and Psychiatry. I actually just Graduated with my degree in clinical mental health counseling with an emphasis in pastoral counseling from Marymount University. And so I am beyond grateful that you wanted me here for this very important show, as Dr. Peters said.
Yes, thank you guys for coming. And to introduce myself further, I, again, am Tiff Majette. I am the marriage and family therapist here at Alpha Street Office of Christian Care and Counseling. I do have my degree as well as marriage and family therapy, and I'm currently in a doctoral program for marriage and family therapy focused on couples counseling. So yes, I do love family systems and therapy, and yeah, I'm glad that you guys are here to have this conversation with me. It's my first, so bear with us. Okay?
Yes, first. Something about the foundation.
First timer.
Yeah, so today we are here to talk about pride awareness, and again, embracing pride. Matthew, would you be able to introduce us to our topic?
Happy to start the conversation.
Great.
So really, the importance of pride, at least the way that I conceptualize it is a celebration of cultivated space. I think that is a celebration of cultivated internal space, external space, community space for people in the queer community. And so there is a very rich history of oppression with queer folks. And I'm not going to step all over Dr. Peters' shoes, but when we start talking about intersectional identities, particularly around oppression, there is a lot, and particularly in the queer community, there's a lot. And I will say queer community, and I will talk about definitions and things later, but that's just a lot easier for me to say than the LGBTQIA++GE. We have a whole thing with the initialism that we'll talk about, but there are a lot of different identities that can fall under the umbrella. So I typically use the umbrella term queer because it just tends to be all-encompassing in my work and in what I do. But back to pride, it is about a celebration of that cultivated space. Goes back to before and big Stonewall riots in New York. And there's a history behind that and a bunch of different things that happened. But now in today's world, pride is celebrated not just in this country, but around the world. We celebrate it in June in this country. And again, really, it is about pride in who you are. And specifically around that queer identity and what that means. Again, that internally is who you are. That externally is being able to come together with other people who identify in a similar way, or other people who might identify as an ally to the queer community, to celebrate queerness, to celebrate difference, to celebrate uniqueness. And so hopefully that was okay.
Yes.
I think that was great.
There's a lot of, I was like, I'm not sure if I need to say anything. No,
I was about to say, did you have something you wanted to add?
I think, yes, to further elaborate on Matthew's point, I think without a question, it's an intentional time for us to be celebratory of this community, and in particular to connect us with allies to see how they can further understand our lived experience. So I think similar to Black History Month and Women's History Month, these months are intentionally created because these people have been historically and contemporarily not seen. And I think this Pride Month, as Matthew said, it's not just in America, it's across the globe. If we get the stats later on, we know that affirming this community, in particular those with these intersection based on race and gender, is really important. So that's why Pride is so important. And not just in June, because we're Pride and we're Black and we're queer all year, but this gives the nation and the world a chance to really to affirm us in this month.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. For our first question, just pulling off of that, what does pride mean to you, Kid?
Pride to me means being comfortable who you are, being your authentic self. I think pride is living your true self, but and we're going to get to this later on, inviting people in who you think are worthy of that one aspect of your identity. I know that coming out is big. I know Pride is, in June, and October 9th is National Coming Out Day. But I think Pride for me is inviting people in to let them know that they can affirm you and you can affirm them based on their shared experience.
Yeah. When I hear pride, I do think of standing as self and self as self, however you want to show up. being pride for just your choice, just being a human and whatever that means for you. So that's when I think of pride. That's what I think of. And at any point, but definitely surrounding pride awareness, LGBTQ, is showing up as self, however that is. How about you?
Very similarly, pride for me has not been really external or community-based. It has been very internal. I spent the majority of my childhood, teenage years, and young adulthood believing that it was not okay for me to be myself. And it took me to being an adult to realize that not okay as a kid really was a form of safety. When I would do things that were just natural to me, like you will notice throughout this podcast, I'm very demonstrative when I talk with my hands, you know what I mean? And I grew up with a lot of, don't talk with your hands, don't walk that way, don't do this. And as a child, what I heard was, don't be you. And so it was a tightrope walk of being a chameleon of, okay, well, let me try to be like this person. And maybe if I be like this person, then I'll fall below the radar. But there was never a pride in being me. And so when I think about pride, for me, it is a very firm understanding that I was created in the image of my Lord, and that is a beautiful thing. And that if the Lord affirms me, who am I to not affirm myself, right? And so just being pride, and I am the son of the Most High God, and that's who I am. And walking very firmly in that and what that means.
I love that. Really, like walking firmly in who you are as you are, right? Like, that's good. Excuse me. I'm sorry that you had that experience of not being able to be yourself, or being able.
I would say, girl,
yeah.
oh my thing,
but what you talk. So I'm going to acknowledge you. I'm sorry for your experience for it, but definitely all who have to have that experience of not just living in self, being true to who they are, or having to be told that they have to correct themselves to fit into something that the people who telling them to correct aren't fitting in themselves. You know, so it is very. That's heartbreaking. But I'm glad that you are in a space now, and I hope that everyone becomes to a space where they feel free and they feel prideful to be themselves.
Oh, child. I hope so too. That's a process, though.
It is very much a process. It's not easy or simple, but it's still a hope.
Yeah.
Right. We talk about pride, and we would talk about the LGBTQIA, but I know that there are so many different people who do not know what those letters mean. And even if they knew the letters mean, they don't know what the words mean. And so I think it's I think it is very important that we definitely identify the alphabet and what each of it means. All right.
Real quick, before we even get into what everything means, just a small overview on why it's important that we all understand what that means. I've come from a school of thought that you treat people the way you want to be treated, right? Or at least you treat people the way they want to be treated. And so one of the things that my father says pretty often is, it don't cost you but so much to be kind. And I think particularly through the lens of believers, when we start talking about the fact that 9 times out of 10, you might be the only Jesus that people get to see, you really do have to learn how to interact with other people in a way that is pleasing and is showing the love of Christ to others. And so what that means is, if you know somebody goes by a different gender pronoun than your little eyes think you believe they look like, figure out how they want to be addressed. It's almost the same thing to me as, like, your name is Tiff. Girl, I'm not going to walk around calling you Diane. That's not your name.
Right.
So why on earth would I not call somebody by who they want to? It's not a preference.
Why is that important?
I can... I was about to say, please do, because my answer is going to be like one then I don't know.
Why is it important?
Why is that important? People have to know why that's important.
It's important because essentially you are erasing part of my identity if you say I'm not going to call you what you want to call you. So
Yeah.
for every 10 years we do a census, correct? The government sends us a document, and you self-identify your income, your education, your race, and you can check any box. So you, as a fellow human, telling me you're not going to address me by my pronouns is this very disheartening in the 21st century in the midst of what's happening across the globe. If I want you to call me Dr. Peters, call me Dr. Peters.
Okay.
And my pronouns are he, human, and activist. Just
Absolutely.
it's not hard.
Yeah.
But essentially, it to me, it adds to the trauma. It to me, it gets to it increases people's suicide rates for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you continue to call them out of their names, we see it in the classrooms, we see it across America, but it definitely impacts us.
It does.
I think you mentioned something very profound, and I want to highlight it, Keadrick. It's about identity. I think typically when people think about queerness or same-sex attraction outside of community, they frame it in their minds as this is what you do. Inside of community, this is who I am. And so you are acknowledging or attacking, if you will, what you think I do. But what I hear is you are not enough. You are not good because this is who I am. It's not just what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a major disconnect is. I don't even know if people realize they're saying, you are not enough. You are not good enough. I will not call you that because they're thinking it's what you do. And in reality, no. This is who I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that's a major disconnect there. So if we're educating, I would encourage everybody to think of it more from a lens of identity and less from a lens of action or what you do.
I just see it's very dismissive and disrespectful. It really who I am, what I do, what have you. If I ask something of you, out of respect, just because I'm a human, I want you.
Because you're what?
A human.
Okay, human.
I want you to do it. I want you to respect me because I respect you. Just because you showed up, just because I showed up. We don't have to know. We don't have to even communicate or talk for you to still respect me. When you don't, and you say I'm gonna do what I want to do, or I'm gonna call you what I want to call you, it's just a form of disrespect, and then you're choosing to disrespect me, and sometimes not care that you're choosing to disrespect me. And what makes it worse is when that person you're disrespecting is your child, or your parent, or your sibling, or your friend, or your boss. You know, when you constantly or just outright I'm going to. No, you shouldn't have to. You should want to respect somebody just because you want that respect in return, or that it's just should be something that's naturally given to us. You know?
Sure.
But yeah, we were explaining we were going to LGBTGEQIAP plus. Yes, that is
a good resource.
The full version. It's lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans or transgender, gender expansive, queer and questioning, intersex, agender, asexual, and aromantic, and pansexual, polygender, and poly relationship systems, and then plus. And that includes everybody, right? And we're going to have this up so that you guys can stop, pause, and read and get your notes done as well. But now let's talk about it. Lesbian, that is when a female has a attraction to another female. I don't think they limit on sexual attraction, but yeah.
So there are, not to get too deep, but, and this is helpful when thinking things through, I think sometimes. There is sexual attraction, there's romantic attraction.
Right.
You can be sexually attracted to someone, but not romantically attracted to them. What does that mean? That means that you might have an attraction to them physically, but you might not want to be in a relationship with that person. Or you might want to be in a relationship with somebody, but not necessarily be sexually attracted to them.
Right.
Those can be two different things. That's why when you talk about a romantic, I don't really want to be in a relationship. It doesn't mean that I don't have, attraction sexually to somebody, but I'm not really trying to be in a relationship, that romantic piece.
Right. Thank you.
Right? Yes? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. Lesbian, a woman who's enduring physical, romantic, and or emotional attraction to other women. gay people who's enduring physical, romantic, and or emotional attraction to people of the same sex. You have bisexual, person who can form enduring physical, romantic, or emotional attraction to those of the same gender or more than one gender. Transgender, an umbrella term for people whose gender identity and or gender expression differs from what is typically associated with the sex they're assigned to at birth. And what I loved about when I looked that up, how they did want to mention that not all transgender people can or will take steps for gender alignment, and a transgender identity is not dependent upon physical appearance or medical procedure. And I thought that was so important because people... You look like, a man, you look like a woman. But I said that I am this, that, or the other. So again, respect that as opposed to just respect what you see. And I remember, I think we talked about this earlier, me seeing on social media a woman say, well, I just can't lie to myself like that. And I just thought that is kind of ridiculous. Like, you can lie to yourself about any and everything under the sun. But when it comes to somebody else, now all of a sudden we have morals and we can't lie. It's not a lie. It is a respect thing. It's not about truth. It's not about false. This is about how I feel. So respect that regardless if my truth and your truth differs. Right?
I'm just saying, and I'm not going to lie to myself. It's less about lying. It is more choosing to believe you. Like if that's what you say and who you say, I choose to believe you. I will say, having spent a very good portion of my life in the South, I am very much so trained, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. And I've had to untrain myself from some of that because I'm not going to sit here and assume your gender.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Regardless. And I have to untrain myself of that often. And I'm like, what is the response? And I'm like, Matthew, I'm like, what is the response? And the response is, yes.
Right. Yes.
No.
Yes.
You don't have to put anything behind that. So for anybody who's been wondering, well, what's my gender neutral response? Baby, the Bible says, let your yeses be yeses and your noes be noes. It's yes and it's no.
And before you move, I think that's a really good point. I always, I have to be really intentional. So as a DEI practitioner, I intentionally make sure I call everybody scholar. All my students are scholars. There's no gender issues there, or future doctor. Or if I see someone that's in the store, I might say, pardon me, cashier, and I might see their name tag. I'll say their name instead of trying to misgender them, because again, that's also giving harm to a population if you misgender people. So people always, my pronouns are he, him, human, and activist, so I'm a male. But sometimes people always say that to me, like, hey, sir or guy. And I'm thinking about, what about my students who are transgender, who don't like them, they are misgendered as he or she. And I was like, so what can we do as humans to be a little bit more intentional to disassociate our gender? We like to project gender so much because patriarchy is so important. And we have to put people in boxes.
I'm going to say that's the problem. We just want to put people in boxes. It's not, it helps people feel safe when they know, right? And so they put these boxes and these labels up so that they know how to operate. And if you operate outside of that, then, oh my God, but that's not true,
Yeah. Oh, but baby, that's in the community too, though. That's not just outside community. That is in community too.
Share
People
more.
like a label because it helps me know how to interact with you.
Right.
So if I can put
Proceed.
this little label on you, then now I know how to proceed, what to do. And I think there are spaces where that is understandable. And there are spaces where that could still be wrong because I'm not going to fit into your box or label.
So how can one know the difference?
We could talk. We could not assume. You know what I mean?
Right.
At the end of the day, the only thing I can assume is that you're human.
I like that.
Right? And
that
so
works. And
let's start there.
It's about the pandemic
You know what
for
I
a
mean?
reason. So
let's
call
have a
me human.
conversation.
Hey, human. Hey.
If I know I'm about to have an extended conversation with somebody who I really, really don't know like that, I will say, by the way, before we proceed, what pronouns do you use? Because I don't want to misgender you.
Yeah.
And sometimes people stare at me and sometimes be like, thank you for asking that.
Staring.
Yeah.
And stare if you like, but I'm not going to misgender you.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had a moment where I was out and there was a bartender and I was about to just, hey miss, but I was like, let me not just assume. Let me not, because I'm thinking, I'm going to just say that, and then they're going to recognize that I'm trying. But I'm like, so I just stopped before I asked my dream. I was like, I'm sorry, can I ask what your pronouns are? And then they told me that it's she, her. And I said, okay, thank you. Ma'am, may I please get
Get to the drink. I'm sorry.
so that I can, right? Because, but I've constantly seen this bartender. And I've never asked. And I've always just, thank you, may I? But I'm the type that wants to. So it's like, if you want to, ask. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. If the most somebody can do is just not answer you, and then that's fine. You get your little feelings hurt. It'll be okay. Right? You just move on. They will be the first. But it felt good. And I'm glad that I was able to just practice a small bit of awareness, pause myself, and then think like, okay, what is right in this situation? The right thing to do is to ask a question. And you're right. Respectfully ask a question. Not just ask a question.
Don't just pinpoint one person in the room. What's your pronouns? You know what I mean?
What are you?
Yeah. What are you?
Right, exactly. The next on our list is queer, an umbrella term to include people who have non-binary, gender fluid, or gender non-conforming identities. And again, people who use this adjective may not exclusively identify their sexual orientation as heterosexual or straight. So I learned something else new about that, because I assumed that queer was essentially, I felt with my ignorance, queer was like a flamboyant gay, if you will. I am more proud to be out, as opposed to some gay men that I feel this will still identify as gay, I know I'm not saying this correctly, so please bear with me. Men who are more masculine, I thought men who are more masculine presented more as gay, or would identify as gay. And I thought that men or women who are more flamboyant would identify as queer. And now I'm learning that that's not true. That it's more so about not identifying as gay or straight.
I was going to say, queer has always been not heterosexual to me.
Okay.
Everything else gets, I lump it in the over-encompassing umbrella of queer, not straight. That is what queer has always meant to me.
Okay.
Because you will find there are men who do not consider themselves gay, but they are in a same gender loving relationship.
Right.
And for many people, they will be like, well, baby, if you only date men, that probably means you gay. But I'm not about to label you. So if you say, I am not gay, but I am in a same gender loving relationship, or, I don't identify as gay, but I have same-sex attraction, coolio.
Right.
I don't think there's a problem with that.
Right.
But queer for me has always been just not straight. Everything else gets lumped into queer.
How about you?
About the same.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Questioning. Someone who is questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity. Intersex, a person with one or more innate sex characteristics, including genitals, reproductive organs, and chromosomes. We have asexual, a person who does not experience sexual attraction. It's also an umbrella term that can include people who are demisexual. They experience some sexual attraction. Gray sexual may not fit the strictest definition of the word. And aromantic, they experience little to no romantic attraction and or has little to no desire to form romantic relationships, like you were speaking of earlier. There's also non-binary, a person whose gender is not male or female, right? So they will pretty much identify as they, them. And then you have plus. So those are used to signify all of the gender identities and sexual orientations that letters and words cannot yet fully describe.
And do you mind, I'm going to go in and chime in. So we went over the entire alphabet. What's important about that piece is that people can identify to be, they can say they're bisexual, gay, and a lesbian. And what's important, as we said a few minutes ago, we really need to affirm people. If I tell you I am gay and bisexual and pansexual, just believe me and move on. Again, when the census comes to your house, no one's verifying your income and your education. People can show up and they can be on the spectrum of multiple ways. And we really are trying our best to educate people about that, because you can be both.
Right.
But you shouldn't question that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the other important piece is there's not just a gay and straight binary. Like, there's a lot more going on here, folks.
Right.
And so and the reason some people are like, why they gotta have all these words and why they gotta have all these terms? A lot of it just has to go with seeing yourself. That's why there's a plus there. Because sometimes you have a feeling or you have a desire, or you have something that there isn't language for.
Right.
And that is a really scary place to be in when you have something that is very real to you and there's not language to put to that. So it's ever expanding to give more language to people's real lived experiences.
Talk about agency.
And it's like representation is important as well. So being able to see that, that is what I identify.
Absolutely.
Does help.
You're not alone. You are not, I guarantee you are not the only person who has experienced that, who feels that way. There is something very powerful finding a word that there are a whole lot of people that be on WebMD looking and then they find a word and it's like, that's it. Those are my symptoms. That's what I'm going through. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Now, some of y'all are hypochondriacs. However, for the rest of y'all, there is something powerful about being able to be like, that's it.
That's it.
I'm
That's
not
me.
the
I
only
find
one.
that.
Like, you know what I mean? Yes. There's something powerful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So speaking of pride awareness, the identities, how about coming out and versus inviting in, and doing more research and in listening, right? I learned from Dr. Peters about inviting in. I was writing the article for Pride, and I was, wanting to make sure I highlighted coming out and just that important piece of it. And then Dr. Peters made sure to note about inviting in and about how that is a space, whereas coming out is where you are choosing to share, but inviting in is actually being able to choose who comes in into your life. And I think that's just amazing, right? Can you explain to everybody what you explained to me about?
So October, it's Pride Month, but October 9th, national, I think ever since like late 80s, National Coming Out Day is October 9th. And during that day, that's where, in particular, people with historical privilege and power, white men in particular, come out of the closet essentially to say, hey, this is my platform. I love men and I like to date only and, hang out with men. So that happens on October 9th. The purpose of inviting in is for safety. That's the real reason. We know in certain urban centers that Black men in particular coming out can result in death from family. They can be kicked out of their house. They can be, robbed or attacked. And, we see the transgender numbers, transgender people being attacked is real. So they're more likely to invite somebody in. So they'll tell their mom or their best friend. And based on your relationship with me, I'll invite you in. I've never gone on Facebook or Instagram. Oh my God, I sound old saying Facebook. But on Instagram or TikTok and say, hey, it's Pride Month. I'm very happy. This is my story coming out. You invite people in because that's your approach.
Yeah,
instead of this coming out piece.
It's more safe.
It's more safe.
Right. And one thing I did learn is that it actually pulls the agency back to self, right? Because it's not like, I have to tell you something. It's no, I get to share something with you or I get to choose who I share, what I share with you, when I share it with you, why, how, all of that. And so that's what I think is so much important about inviting in versus coming out.
Yeah, and just to emphasize this issue on safety, statistics, queer young adults and youth are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than their cisgendered and heterosexual counterparts.
Yeah.
And a large part of that, if you look into the research on youth who are experiencing homelessness, it's because they have been kicked out of their homes. That happens exponentially more to queer youth and young adults than it does to heterosexual and cisgendered youth and young adults.
So what can we do, or what can parents do? What can children do? What can be done? How can we or anybody navigate that conversation situation when it comes to teens maybe coming out or inviting in or trying to find their identity with parents that may be religious and may not think a certain way or may not agree or even acknowledge them? How can these teens or these parents, how can they help navigate a situation such as coming out or inviting in safely? Or can it be?
I had a conversation as an adult with my mother, And I made a comment to her, and I said to her, even as a child, I always knew I was different. And I have always known that I am not like most people. I meant that in a positive way, but my mama heard, even as a child, I always knew I was queer, which not what I was saying. However, she said something to me that I will never forget, and it was very profound, and I really appreciated it. My mom said to me that, and this is after I had a conversation with her, kind of going back to what I was saying before, growing up feeling like I couldn't be myself. What I realized as an adult is that it is not that my parents did not love me or care about me, but when you speak to a child through a lens of fear, they don't hear your fear. They hear your unacceptance. And so you have to be very careful how you speak to children, because what you're trying to do to protect them will often make them feel like they are not accepted, right? And I recognize that that's what happened to me. As an adult, my parents were scared because we live in a world where queer kids get killed, and Black queer kids absolutely are getting killed. You understand what I'm saying? And so there was a protecting you from all these things that I don't want you to have to face.
Yes.
But I'm not having that direct conversation. And
Absolutely.
particularly in the church, we are not very good about having direct conversations. That's another soapbox.
No, we're not.
But I said that to say, my mother said to me, I wish I would have said to you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being different.
Yes.
And I wish I had been there to hold your hand so we could navigate that together.
Yes.
That is what I would say to parents. Tell your children there's absolutely nothing wrong with being unique.
Right.
You were created in the image of God, Imago Dei, right in his image. There's nothing wrong with being unique, because your uniqueness is a branch of beauty and light from your Heavenly Father.
Right.
So if you believe that you're different, here is my hand. Let's walk through it together. Let's see what that means.
Yes.
And because as a believer, you will never know who you are if you are not looking at yourself through the image of God. That is your identity. Everything else will fall under that, but it is through the lens of a loving relationship with Christ. So that is what I suggest that parents
Hey,
do.
man.
Okay, Pastor.
Right, I'm about to make a donation.
Yes,
go,
I'm
girl.
about to say, amen.
There is a cash app. No, let me stop. We take Zelle and Venmo. Come on,
Zelle.
Let me stop.
No, you are absolutely correct, especially about the parenting out of fear. As a parent, I have to be consciously aware, and I still do it. Even with all this knowledge, I still can sometimes see her and see the danger, see her and see me, see her and see society, see her and see everything she's not paying attention to. And I get scared. And what they see, what they get from us being afraid is that fear. You get the energy, you get the emotions, but you don't get what's becoming behind that. You don't really get to understand why I'm so damn scared, right?
Yeah.
Why? What's the scare? What's the boogeyman really about? But also, I have to learn how to communicate that to you in a way that you can really hear me and listen to me. I got to be able to tell you, I'm afraid. I'm scared, right? And here's why. And this is why. And then let's walk through this together. And then please tell me what you're afraid of too, or tell me what you're not. So I ain't got to be afraid if you ain't afraid. What I'm afraid for if you got it. But if you don't, or I don't think you do, or I didn't, right? Because a lot of times we parent from our past. I didn't. Some
From a
of
place
our
of
parents
trauma.
are gay. Some of our parents are battling our own identity. Some of our parents are confused. And then you see your kid being confused, but you know that everybody around you, from your pastor to your parents to your siblings to your spouses, everybody rejects and dejects you. What's next, right? And so you do have to be more conscious about addressing that fear with self first before you even bring it to your kid. And then when you do bring it to your kid, come with that place of understanding, be compassionate, ask questions, be curious. I tell all parents, be curious. Like you think you know, but you don't really know your child until you ask them some questions and you really pay attention to their behavior and you take in that information. Outside of that, they are a stranger. They are a stranger that they live in your house that you think you know. But they not. They their own identities. Let them identify themselves to you. Show me who you are. I know earlier when I was thinking for the longest time of what to name Embracing Pride, the show Embracing Pride, I was dropping off my child and I realized like you're about to hit another year. You're about to go to a whole nother school. There's so many different transitions that I am excited for. And yet I still have no idea who you become. And when I think of who you become, all I really want for you to be safe. I want you to be independent. I want you to be courageous and brave. I want you to be smart. But I don't care who you love. I don't care who you identify as. I ain't gotta call you Brooke no more. You want me to call you Bobby? I'll call you Bobby.
Just be on the honor roll, Bobby.
Please.
Bobby better
Bring home some
Bobby
money,
better be on the
please.
honor roll.
Honor roll.
Take care of me.
A refund check for college.
A real
Bobby better make
nice
that
nursing
bed.
home if I gotta go to one, okay? But
Bobby better take the school shoes off when you get in this house.
Okay? But I want to embrace my child as is. And I feel like with pride, that's what it should be about. Just embracing how you show up as you are. So
And
yes.
to answer that, because this question to me was very loaded. I think based, beyond the religions piece, I'm still processing that. But Dr. Brene Brown talks about your superpower is being vulnerable. And I think parents and anybody thinking about their sexual orientation or gender identity and the fluid aspect of it needs to be honest with that. And then, we know Miss Majette is a counselor. Talk therapy is really, really important. The body keeps scoring, so you have to get that energy out of you. And you need
What'd
to
you say?
The body keeps the score.
Say what?
The body keeps scoring.
Okay. People be wondering why their back hurt. They be wondering why they got so many stomach pains,
Girl,
why they
that's a
always
whole
got
other
headaches,
podcast.
why their
That's
eye
a
keep
whole other
twitching.
episode.
What?
That's a whole other episode.
'Cause you ain't like, yeah.
Particularly people of color, because intergenerational trauma is real.
Ooh, we carrying on our mother stuff.
You're carrying
We carrying on our grandmother stuff.
We're carrying on stuff from
that you deal
enslaved
with
people.
before I
Correct.
even came.
Okay.
Correct.
Right?
It's
Okay.
Correct.
Continue.
So essentially, you need to be open with them, give that empathetic ear. But again, resources are here. Going to talk therapy, and then maybe journaling. Maybe you don't want to do a coming out video. Maybe you want to invite people in and saying, "Hey, I'm having these thoughts. Are you going to walk along with me? Are you going to hold my hand with me? Because again, I'm human."
Yeah.
But it should be your decision.
Your
Whatever you
decision,
decide,
right.
do it safely.
Safely.
Right?
I will also say exploration of sexual identity does not have to be through sexual acts. You can explore sexual identity academically. Personally,
Come on, academic.
that was the most helpful to me. Academic. You
Oh,
know what I
yeah.
mean?
There's literature.
The most trouble came from other things.
That field experience. Get you a little bit more trouble.
Came from academic things, reading accounts of people
on,
and their
reading.
experiences and seeing me in other people's experiences. There's something very powerful about being seen,
James
right?
Baldwin.
We talked about that earlier. And so being able to read academically, just other people have had these experiences and they don't want to put a label to it either. Cool. It could mean this, it could mean that, but you're not alone. These are things. That's how I learned about the difference between affectional and romantic attraction versus sexual attraction. The way that the author talked about, and I forget what her name was, but she has wonderful literature on bisexuality. What makes you hot versus what makes you warm? And I'm like, okay, I can get with that. Like just framing it in a different way,
Right.
So just that academic pursuit of learning more about identity and different things can also be very helpful.
So, i.e., read. That's what you're saying. Read. You don't have to necessarily pick up a book. You got a computer on your phone. Google.
From a reliable source.
For multiple sources. Don't just
Right.
read the one, the
Right.
first one that pop up.
There's
read
a lot of
couple more.
information out
See
there.
what flows is information standard across the board, or are we fluctuating, right?
And know that it can change. Who you are today does not necessarily have to be who you are tomorrow. And then you might later discover that none of that is who you are. That is okay. To Dr. Peters' point, the only one thing you don't want to do is lie to yourself. Because you'll start internalizing somebody else's script.
Yes.
And then you're going to have to get narrative therapy to figure out what your own
I'll
story
put that in my
is.
notes.
That's
Narrative
Tiff right
therapy.
there. Okay. But you're right, absolutely. So many times we have to deconstruct these narratives that's been created
For
for us. That's off somebody else's definition. We haven't defined it for ourselves. We haven't defined love. We ain't defined relationship. We ain't defined being a woman or a man. We just living in somebody else's, and we wonder why we're so conflicted. We're so confused. We don't align with nothing because you ain't defined nothing. How about you stop, take a beat, pause. You're running your own race. Nobody else's, regardless of how much anybody else expects from you. This is still your life. It's your race. You're with you to the day you die. So you have a lifetime to figure it out. It doesn't have to start and stop today.
Yeah, regardless of what society says, because society will put a clock on you,
Oh my
society will
God.
put
Make
expectations
you feel
on
like you're
you.
racing.
They'll put all these things on you.
Yeah.
And that is the thing about,
But
y'all
not
know that's
even
why I'm
just
not on social
society.
media, because it will influence you. And that is what
I've
it's designed
noticed.
to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's doing its job.
It is.
You just have to be very careful about what you're being influenced to do. Because a lot of it is influencing you to think, I have to hit these marks, I have to be this person, and ain't none of them really salient to who you are.
They're all influenced, not even just in society, but in the church too. What does it mean when you hear a church say that they're affirming? How does that pull on you?
It's very welcoming.
Oh, is that a question?
It is a question.
Oh.
As, what do you mean? Question mark.
So again, I'm very impressed that Alpha Street is doing this. The Black Church 30 years from now,
I'm
20
saying.
years ago was not having this conversation during Pride Month.
Honey, the Black Church 5 minutes ago
Is
is not having this conversation.
This is important.
This is Alpha Street. This is important.
Very important. And intersectional important. But
Go ahead.
no. But in the essence that we affirm our Blackness during Black History Month, but the fact that even your church, Alpha Street, is hosting this conversation is very important because it's a resource. It needs to be educated. People need to be, once we become conscious, we can get to overall consciousness about other issues really impeding our communities.
Yes. Absolutely.
Social justice issues, but if you can't identify my pronouns, you're not going to be able to successfully maneuver that space.
Right. So again, when the church say they affirming, what does that mean to you, or what does that make you feel? How do you take that? Are you feeling more welcome?
I feel like I'm going to belong. One of the most painful human experiences, thinking about mapping the atlas of the heart, she talks about is being invisible. And I think Alpha Street saying you are affirming church means I can come here and not be concerned about anything. I could just show up and hear the word because I'm also dealing with inflation. I'm also dealing with social justice. But at least at this one aspect of my life, I can come here and be affirmed in this space. And I'll probably pay my tithes. If I go to church and they bashing me, I'm not going to give my tithes.
I mean,
I'm not. Because my money, I work hard for my money. Capitalism is beating us.
Yeah.
Romans 2,
Oh, come
verse
on.
1 in the Passion Translation
Eating.
says,
Eating.
No matter who you are, before you judge the wickedness of others, you had better remember this. You are also without excuse, for you too are guilty of the same kind of things. When you judge others and then do the same things they do, you condemn yourself. Romans chapter 3, verse 10 says, and the scriptures agree, for it is written, there is no one who always does what is right. No, not even one. There is no one with true spiritual insight, and there is no one who seeks after God alone. All have deliberately wandered away from God's ways. All have become depraved and unfit. Kindness has disappeared from them all. Not even one is good. It goes on to say, but now independently of the law, the righteousness of God is tangible and brought to light through Jesus, the anointed one. This is the righteousness that the scriptures prophesied would come. It is God's righteousness that made visible through the faithfulness of Jesus Christ. And now all who believe in him receive that gift. For there is really no difference between us, for we have all sinned and we are all in need of the glory of God. Yet through his powerful declaration of acquittal, God freely gives us his righteousness. Now his gift of love and favor cascades over us, all because Jesus, the anointed one, has liberated us from the guilt, punishment, and power of sin. So our conclusion is this: God's wonderful declaration that we are righteous in his eyes can only come when we put our faith in Christ and not in keeping the law. After all, is God the God of the Jews only, or is he equally the God for all humanity? Of course, he's the God of all people. Since there is only one God and he will treat us all the same, he eliminates our guilt and makes us right with him by faith, no matter who we are. That is what an affirming church is.
And that came from what book again?
That is the book of Romans, chapter 2, verse 1, and then that's Romans chapter 3 and a couple different.
And they can
verses of Passion
find this text
Translation.
where again?
In the Bible.
In the
Holy-
what?
the
now?
Holy Bible.
In the Holy Bible. Oh,
Write that down. Romans 2.
Romans 2, 1, and then Romans 3.
Some good reading. Okay.
Romans 3, 10 through 12, and then 21 through 24, and then 28 through 30.
Yes.
That's good.
We are
Well, out of time.
well, and I wish we could continue, but we can't. But I wish we could. But one thing I would like to say that you both have mentioned several times, is about feeling invisible. And what you just read, it says by God, like, we are visible. It's just that it lets you know that just because you are in this community doesn't mean that you have to be away from God for him to see you. Because he still will. You're still visible. Even if you feel invisible, even in the church if you feel invisible, even in your families, in your homes, or to yourself, you're seen.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and I'm glad that you read that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We are out of time, unfortunately. We do have a lot more resources that we out, and there is an article up, so please read to get more. And please ask questions, and be open to more conversations about everything about the human experience. You'll learn a lot when you just ask a human how their day was, what their life's about, right? We don't have to know everything about them, how they identify, to still be treated with respect.
Absolutely.
To be loved as we want to be loved and cared for and respected. All right. Any final words, gentlemen?
Thank you for having me on the show. I think this was a very necessary and important conversation. I would encourage everybody out there to continue to have the conversation. You know, the way I live my life is that I might be the only Jesus people see. So if you know that, how would you treat everybody if you knew that you might be the only Jesus, the way they get to know Jesus? It changes how you treat people, how you look at people, how you talk to people. I'd encourage you to keep that in mind.
Amen.
And again, thank you for having me on the show. I would say continue to learn.
Yeah.
Attend workshops, attend different events, and then to be an ally is not to be passive. It means to be active. So just be actively engaged and standing up for people when they're not in the room. So just go out of your way to continue to learn.
As a proud ally, I love to support any way I can. I love to educate myself. I don't have a problem asking questions, and I encourage every ally to do the same, to ask your questions, be respectful as you do it, but read, research. And then come with an open heart and an open mind, come willing to understand and not just to respond or spew. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is the Office of Christian Care and Counseling at Alfred Street Baptist Church. I am Tiff Majette. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
Kind, gracious, and loving God, we come right now thanking you for a safe space. God, your word reminds us that they will know that we are believers by our love. So God, I ask that you will help us, that you will help to employ us to show our love in every aspect of that word. That those that we interact and interface with, God, will not feel discriminated, will not feel slighted, will not feel judged, but they will feel the love of God from us. Why? Because we have first received God's love. And so, God, I ask that safe spaces, not just in this moment, but safe spaces are made everywhere across this world. God, that people will be able to show up authentically wherever they are and know that their lives are not in danger. God, I pray that you will help us rid ourselves of ignorance, that you will help us move in a way that we will find resource and respite and peace as we seek your word and those you have endowed with the knowledge and intellect to help walk through sensitive spaces such as this topic that we have discussed on tonight. God, I pray that someone will feel seen and heard and validated because there is a church that is bold enough to stand on God, stand in God, and stand with God to support our brothers and sisters. So God, in the matchless name of Christ, I lift this prayer and ask God that you will let it be so, and that testimonies will come, that word of mouth will spread, that there is a loving God that loves beyond bounds, and there is nothing that we can do about it. So thank you, God. Thank you for hearing this servant's cry. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.